Today I'm going to be debunking 13 common fitness myths. I've gone through my own fat loss and fitness journey over the past few years, and I recently went on a fat loss transformation that lasted about 5 months. And over that period, I've learned a lot of myths and misconceptions regarding fitness. Some of them are true and some of them are complete lies. And the funny part is most of these are common myths that you've probably heard of in your life. The first myth is lifting weights stunts your growth. Now, I've heard this so many times. I've heard this personally from family members, people who are close to me. And the funny part is my fitness journey basically debunks this myth completely, because I started gymming at the age of 12 turning 13. At that age, I was quite short. I was actually around 5 foot tall. And I remember when I was telling my older brother that I was going to the gym, he was discouraging me, saying that going to gym stunts your growth. And he genuinely believed that. Fast forward a few years later, I didn't stop going to the gym. In fact, I continued to gym and I even went quite hard. And a few years later, now I'm about 18 years old, and I can confidently say that I'm way taller than I was. Back then I was about 5 foot something, like 5'2", 5'3". Now I'm about 6'1". So in that time, I've actually grown quite exponentially. So this completely proves that going to gym and lifting weights does not stunt your growth. In fact, the only thing that does stunt your growth is not going to gym, because you're going to be stunting your muscle growth if you don't lift weights. The next myth is the more you sweat, it means the more fat you're burning. Now, I don't know where this myth came from, but to me, the answer seems obvious. Sweating and fat loss isn't linked. In fact, there's times when I was sweating a lot, but I was during a bulking period. And because I was doing cardio, I was running, and it's hot outside, I was sweating like crazy, but it was during a bulking phase and I was actually gaining body fat. So explain, how do I gain body fat while sweating? It's because sweating has no correlation to fat loss. Sweat is simply a cooling mechanism that just cools your body down, and that myth seems obvious. It's obviously not true. The next myth is that more exercise equals more gains. Now, this is a very interesting one, because I actually believed this myth back then, and I used to go to the gym 6 times a week at some point, and I was training really hard, thinking that the more I'm training and the more volume I just have in my workouts, that I will get more results, I will get more muscle growth, more growth. And it got to the point where I did train quite consistently for about 4 months straight, training 6 times a week consistently. So I trained Monday to Saturday. My only rest day was Sunday. And I did that consistently for 4 months, not missing a single day. And in that period, I actually had the worst results when it comes to muscle growth. My strength between workouts wasn't increasing. My progressive overload wasn't increasing. I felt fatigued. I genuinely needed to recover, and I genuinely needed to rest. Looking back, I wonder why I even pushed through the pain thinking that I was gonna get more results when I knew I needed more recovery. But obviously in the moment, you don't think like that. You can only see it when you've stopped training 6 times a week, and looking back, you realize, oh, I was overtraining. But in the moment, it doesn't feel like you're overtraining. Right now, I'm actually training 3 to 4 times a week, and I'm training quite consistently, session to session progression. I'm actually building muscle way faster than I was back then when I was training 6 times a week, because my lifts strength is increasing each session, even though I'm not in a bulking phase or anything like that. I'm just in a maintenance phase right now, but I'm actually building more muscle than I was during that time. The next myth is that training abs will get you abs. Now, when I was about 12 years old, I saw a video of a guy doing a circuit. It was an ab circuit where you do push-ups, you do a whole bunch of sit-ups and crunches, and he said that you get abs if you do this consistently for like 2 months. So I decided to try it. I decided to do push-ups every single day and crunches, and I committed fully. While I was doing the push-ups, I could actually feel like my abs had a pump, and I could feel my abs when I was actually doing the push-ups because I had a pump, but I still had that layer of fat over it. And looking back, I didn't get abs in the end, obviously, because my muscles and ab development did increase, but I still had a layer of fat over it. So no matter how hard I trained abs back then, I couldn't see my abs. Fast forward to now, I've just gone over my 5-month fat loss transformation. I hardly trained abs at all during this entire transformation, and now I can see my abs quite clearly. So training abs won't necessarily reveal your abs. If you want to see your abs, you just simply have to remove a small layer of fat that's covering your abs. Believe it or not, but every single person on the earth has abs. It's literally a muscle just sort of under the skin. You just have to reveal the muscle by lowering your body fat percentage. Now, training abs will get your sort of ab muscles bigger, so it will be easier to see at a higher body fat percentage. But the biggest factor that will determine how visible your abs are is that layer of body fat. How small is that layer of fat that's covering your abs? So this is indeed also a myth. Now the next myth is, if you don't get sore after a workout, it means you didn't go hard enough. Now this is interesting because it does seem to have some sort of science that backs it up. What the science does clearly say is that if you get muscle soreness, it means that yes, you did challenge your muscle, you did push your muscle quite hard. But the paradox is, if you don't get muscle soreness, it doesn't mean that you didn't train hard enough. Usually you only get muscle soreness when you introduce a new exercise or a movement that your body isn't sort of used to. I remember I used to get muscle soreness all the time my first year into the gym because I had never done any serious training before that first year of gym. So every single exercise in the gym was basically a new exercise to me, and I got muscle soreness pretty often. There's periods of my life when I didn't train legs for months, and when I would go back and hit legs, I would have muscle soreness for like 5 days in a row. It's because I'm not used to that muscle stimulus. My muscles aren't used to it, and that's what causes the muscle soreness. The muscle soreness doesn't come as a result of hard training alone. It comes as a result of new training stimulus. So if you do get muscle soreness, then yes, it means your muscles were stimulated quite hard, and it means that you did train hard. But if you don't get muscle soreness, it doesn't mean that you didn't train hard. So this indeed is a myth. The next myth is that cardio kills your gains. Now this is a very interesting one. Now if you're doing excessive amounts of cardio and you're severely under eating low calories whilst doing lots of cardio, then yes, of course you will lose muscle, quite obviously. But in my opinion, cardio actually improves your gym sessions because it increases your heart health. There was a time when my cardio was just horrible. It was just after COVID. So COVID, everyone was sitting down being lazy, doing nothing. During COVID, I didn't do much movement and exercise. As soon as the restrictions got lifted and the gyms reopened, I remember like pushing really hard in the gym. I felt out of breath when I was just doing bicep curls, and I realized that I wasn't pushing that hard. It was just because my cardiovascular health was literally bad. So it made me feel like I was pushing insanely hard, yet I was just doing a normal easy movement. If your heart health is healthier, you wouldn't struggle as much doing those simple movements. Cardio can be a fat loss cheat code because it increases your metabolism. You literally burn more calories just by doing more movement and doing more cardio than if you weren't doing cardio. The next myth is that fasted cardio burns more calories than non-fasted cardio. Now this is interesting, because in the long term, the calorie expenditure is the same. But what fasted cardio may do, it may actually negatively impact your training, because when there's no fuel that your body can tap into doing high intensity cardio, your body tends to want to eat into amino acids, which is literal muscle. So if there's no glycogen stored through carbs in your muscle, your body might actually break down muscle tissue to use that as energy. So it's actually might be better to do cardio when you've eaten, because now you actually have the energy. And plus, you can literally faint if you don't have any energy at all, you're in a calorie deficit and you fasted. On the other hand, fasted cardio is really good because it teaches you how to push yourself hard, and you can use your cardio as a reward. You can use food as a reward after doing cardio, and saying you can only eat after you do your cardio, which I did during my fat loss phase. So it is of course a myth. The next one is that you can't outrun a bad diet. Now we've all heard this countless times, and this is so true, because the more exercise you do, the more high intensity exercise you do, the more you actually need high quality fuel, which you won't get from a bad diet. There was a time I actually ate cake, and I felt so bad eating that piece of cake because I was during my fat loss phase and I was trying to lose body fat at that time. So I felt bad, so I went on a run to try and like compensate for the cake. I went on a 10k run, and during the run I actually felt like lethargic, sick, because the only calories I had were unhealthy calories from unhealthy foods like cake, sweets, sugar. It's just not clean calories that your body can properly use as fuel. So you actually feel worse when you try and train hard and your diet is bad. The more hard training you do, the more high intensity training you do, you actually want to eat cleaner because your body needs the micronutrients from clean food. Unhealthy food has way less micronutrients than healthy food. Healthy food is micronutrient dense, and it gives your body the fuel it needs to recover from intense workouts like that. So you can't outrun a bad diet. That is true. The next myth is that muscle turns into fat if you stop working out. Now, a lot of people have told me this. Actually, one person has told me this. Yeah, and I didn't believe them, obviously. And the thing about muscle and fat is that they're two completely different cell structures. The cell structures of muscle is completely different to the cell structure of fat. Now, I think where this myth truly comes from is like when bodybuilders who are in insane shape come off, stop competing, and then they look squishy and chubby when they're older. That's why some people think, oh, the muscle just turned into fat. But no, muscle can't turn into fat. In fact, muscle feels completely different to fat. Muscle is like hard and dense, and fat is like that squishiness, that squishy tissue that's over the muscle. So that hard, dense muscle, do you think it will turn into some squishy marshmallow fluffy thing? No, it won't turn into that. So muscle will not turn into fat. The next myth is that you should avoid junk food 100% if you want to see results. And in my fat loss journey, I went through cycles of when I would completely cut out all junk cold turkey. There was actually a time I went completely off added sugars for an entire week, and I just wanted to see what progress I would make. Long story short, it was very, very difficult to stick to no added sugars, because you realize how many foods out there actually have added sugars in them. You realize that sauces have added sugars. You realize fruit juice have added sugars. You realize that there's added sugars in almost every single food. The question is not what foods do I have to avoid. It's now what foods can I eat, because there's more foods on the earth, on this planet, with added sugars than foods that don't. And in that time frame, I actually quit no added sugars because it was so difficult. I couldn't survive. I couldn't last that diet, and it was unsustainable. So going on these 100% or nothing, all or nothing type mindsets is actually very dangerous, because once you fall off, once you make one mistake, once you have one Oreo, once you have one donut, you now like nothing, I've messed up, and then you eat the whole pack of Oreos, then you eat a whole tub of ice cream. And these diets never worked for me. I never saw lasting results with these. They were just too restrictive. I couldn't sustain them for long enough. The diets that did work for me, however, were the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the foods I ate came from clean, whole, organic foods, and then 20% of the calories that I was eating came from foods that I enjoyed that weren't necessarily clean or organic. This could be cookies or a sweet treat. This was the best approach for me, because even though I was dieting and I was in a calorie deficit, because I got the psychological relief of having foods that I enjoy, like cookies, biscuits here and there. Since I got that relief of enjoying the foods every once in a while, I didn't feel like I was on a diet. I didn't feel restricted at all, even though I was still in a calorie deficit. So I was able to stick to that diet for a much longer period of time, and therefore I was able to see better results. I literally saw better results following the 80-20 rule than following these restrictive diets, because I couldn't stick to them. So in short, this is a myth. You don't have to go 100% clean, healthy diet. The best approach is actually to follow the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time clean, whole, organic, 20% of the time eat what you want, and that's where you'll get the best results. The scale measures progress. Now, there's actually a time during my fat loss phase I was supposed to be losing weight, and I was supposed to be getting lighter, and I was just using the scale as my main source to measure progress, which was my first dangerous mistake, because I was stuck at 80 kgs. The scale was stuck. It wasn't moving. It was literally at 80 kgs for a good amount of weeks. Luckily, at the time, I was taking progress photos, and in those progress photos, although my weight was still 80 kgs, you could see that I had a little bit more muscle mass and I was looking a little bit leaner. So what happened during that time was I was gaining muscle at the same rate as I was losing body fat, which makes the scale stay at 80 kgs, but my body recomposition was changing completely. So I was making progress, but if I was just listening to the scale and I didn't have the progress photos also, I would have thought, wow, this diet's not working. But I was losing body fat, but I was also gaining muscle at the same time. That's why it looked like I wasn't making progress. It's because I was making progress in my fat loss and in my muscle gaining, which made the weight stay the same. So the scale measures weight. It doesn't measure progress. It doesn't matter if I'm 80 kgs, if I'm 75 kgs. I just want to look good. I want to look more muscular. I want to look leaner. That's the goal. The weight number actually doesn't matter that much. As long as I look good, that's my goal. So stop using just the scale to measure your progress, because it is not a good indication of progress. What is a good indication is your look, your overall look. How do you look? Do you look leaner? Do you look more muscular? That's the whole goal. So use the scale and use progress photos to rectify what the scale is saying. Now, the next myth is that sports drinks are better than water for hydration. Now, this one was actually shocking. So for you to get properly hydrated, you need about 3 things. You need water, you need electrolytes, which is sodium and potassium, and you need carbohydrates to properly get hydrated. The reason is because your muscles can't hold on to any sort of water if there's no carbs. So you need electrolytes and carbohydrates. So the interesting thing is, yes, sports drinks are way better than water for hydration specifically. Now there was this other YouTuber I was watching on YouTube. He had dehydration issues and he went to the doctors to sort of check out what was going on, and his doctor did confirm you do have dehydration issues. He actually informed his doctor that he was drinking 4 liters of water a day, but the reason why he still had dehydration issues is because he didn't have enough electrolytes. So even though he was drinking water, the water was just going right through his body, in and out, and his body couldn't even use the water that he was drinking because there was no electrolytes. So you do need electrolytes coupled with your water in order for you to actually keep that hydration. The best approach would be to literally get electrolytes. You can buy them at the store, or you can just add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt to some water, and that will make it more hydrating. You can literally drink milk. Milk is more hydrating than water alone. The next thing is calories don't matter if you eat clean. Now this is very interesting because some people think that if you just eat clean foods, conventionally clean, whole organic foods, that you will lose weight no matter what. But they are wrong. Literally, if you eat in a calorie surplus, even if you eat in clean, whole, organic, conventional foods, you still will gain weight because you're in a calorie surplus. Sumo wrestlers, those big wrestlers, actually eat very clean diets. If you evaluate their diets, they are very clean, focusing on clean, whole, organic foods. But the reason why they're so big is because they eat 10,000 calories a day, and they literally eat clean, whole, organic, healthy foods to gain weight, to be heavier, so that they could be better sumo wrestlers. And then there was a study done on this guy. The only food he ate was Takis, nothing else, just Takis. And because he ate in a calorie deficit while eating Takis, he was losing weight. Now obviously it's not healthy because there's no protein, there's no micronutrients, but he still lost weight just because he was eating less calories than his maintenance. So no matter how clean you eat, if you eat in a calorie surplus, you're eating more calories than you're burning, then you're going to gain weight, and you're going to lose weight if you're in a calorie deficit, even if the foods aren't that clean. That's why I follow the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time eat clean, whole, organic foods. 20% of the time eat the foods that you genuinely enjoy. As long as you're in a calorie deficit, you will lose weight.